The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, and our guest is Amanda. So hi, Amanda. Can you start off by introducing yourself and telling me a little bit more about your age, your education, where you're at with your job and hobbies?
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So yes, my name's Amanda. I am 32 years old. I just celebrated my birthday. And my job right now, I have a lot. I basically work in marketing, program development. I also run a nonprofit in the Philippines, and I'm also a basketball player.
What is your condition or rheumatic disease?
It's kind of a long story, and there's a lot of diagnosis I have right now. Initially, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease very young, like around 16 years old. And I tried a lot of treatments that didn't work. And during those treatment trials and procedures I did and hospitalizations, they found out I also had lupus. And so I went through that journey with lupus and Crohn's. And then around 2016, in my mid-20s, I had to have surgery. That was my last option. And during surgery, they found colon cancer. So they had to remove my entire large intestine and half of my small intestine. And about 11 surgeries later, I'm here now with a permanent ileostomy bag. The Crohn's is technically gone. I still have lupus, and I was recently diagnosed with multi-organ dysfunction. Yeah, so it's a lot.
That is a handful. And you're a basketball player. Were you with a nonprofit and you're still continuing life with so many diagnoses. That's amazing. Wow.
Thank you.
So what were kind of the symptoms that led you to coming up with those diagnoses? I mean, you didn't come up with it, but to go to your doctor and be like, okay, these are the problems I'm having. How did that kind of work for each one?
I'm sure a lot of people with Crohn's or rheumatic diseases can relate. I didn't even know what was wrong. I didn't know there was an actual name for it. I just had these horrible symptoms, and then I kind of just stumbled into the hospital and all these doctor appointments, and all of a sudden I was diagnosed. I was an honor roll student. I was like a superstar in the basketball team in high school. And then all of a sudden, all these traumatic events happened to me, like domestic violence, sexual abuse, horrible car accident. And it was just back to back. And then right after that, I noticed my health just started going downhill. I couldn't play basketball anymore. I was going to the bathroom 20 times a day, losing blood. I had no energy, and my hair was falling out, and I didn't know what was wrong. I was just always tired, and I kept collapsing. And then finally, my mom, who's a nurse, was like, something's not right. And I was like, oh, this isn't normal. And she's like, no, we need to go see a doctor. And then the doctor called us after doing labs, and they said, you need to take your daughter to the hospital right now. She's really sick. And then that's when I was diagnosed.
Is that when you were diagnosed with Crohn's or lupus or cancer?
So I was first diagnosed with Crohn's.
Okay.
In the hospital at 16.
And then that's when they found out that you also had lupus?
No, they found I had lupus a few years later because I was going through treatments in life, and I was always getting like a butterfly rash. I was just always in pain. I kept getting kidney failure. Sometimes I would get pleurisy, which is inflammation in the lungs, and losing a ton of hair. And I was like, I don't know what's going on with me. Is this maybe part of Crohn's, or, is this maybe the treatment I'm on? Because I was on a lot of treatments for Crohn's, which has chemotherapy-like symptoms. So I really wasn't sure what was going on because everything was overlapping. And I think that's what's very complex about rheumatic diseases is it's hard to pinpoint what's what and what's normal, because if you live with it for so long, you don't know what's considered normal. Your normal and your reality is the symptoms. So it's very hard to pinpoint and diagnose it.
Because you're so used to living with it, like you mentioned. And I know even in terms of, because you have different diagnoses, how do you even differentiate what is what? Because obviously they all cause pain, but
Right.
have you ever been confused at some point?
Yeah, all the time, because there's so many times where I get frustrated and then I'm in the hospital. Like, I go to the hospital maybe once a month, and every time I go, they're like, we can't figure out if this is your lupus or if this is the Crohn's or the multi-organ dysfunction, you know? So it's kind of like really complex, and it takes like a lot of different specialists to kind of come in and like kind of like put the pieces together or take a step back and think outside the box, which to me is really important as a patient. And I've also worked in healthcare that you can't treat every patient the same. Every patient, especially with rheumatic disease or autoimmune, it's very complex, very different, and it's not a one size fits all treatment plan for them. So it's important to have patient advocacy.
Yeah, that is really important. And it's a
Mhm.
struggle at first. And I think you can probably talk a little bit about that soon. But
Mhm.
you obviously get better at it the more that you do it. And it sucks that you have to constantly do it. But that's just what makes your overall like quality of life and healthcare so much better. So I wanted to kind of talk about the medications you've been on because you have multiple diagnoses. So is it a lot of medication? Because I think like the medication I have is a lot, but then now I'm thinking about you. So how does this work?
So on the iPhone, you have the health
Health
app. I always have it on me, and I also have it written down on a little card in my wallet. So, and it's actually helped because there's times where I've collapsed and I've been unconscious, and I put that piece of paper in my service dog's vest, and he was with me waiting for the paramedics, and they got it out of his little pocket, and they were able to see what I'm allergic to, what I'm taking, and all my surgeries, conditions. So I think it's really important to have, whether you're healthy or not, you know, you never know. But yeah, as far as medications, I take a lot. I've cut it down because I'm trying to be more natural, but I mean, I'm sure anyone with autoimmune disease knows prednisone. I've been on prednisone. I'm still recovering. My face is still puffy from that. I was on it for pleurisy and kidney failure. Yeah, I've been on everything. I've done chemo. I've done 6-MP, 5-FU. Yeah, I have a whole list. But yeah, right now it's mostly stuff for my PTSD, stuff for anxiety that I take when I really need it, or if I'm having like nightmares. Yeah, I've come a long ways. I used to take like 50 pills a day, and I've narrowed it down now to like maybe 20.
That is progress. People probably say that's insane. She's saying 50, now 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because I think at least in a day, like on Mondays, because I'm on multiple medications, I probably take like 11 and a half pills. And then when you add those like 3 supplements, it's 14 and a half. But
Wow.
like I take pills any day over needles. I don't know if
Right.
you feel that way.
Yeah, and I've also had PICC lines as well and a port. So PICC lines are like if you are constantly getting treatment and you need to be on, like, say, for example, like me, I had to be on TPN several times. So that means that I'm getting nutrition through a pump because my body is struggling to absorb nutrition or make it. So what they do is they give your stomach and your organs a rest by just straightforward pumping it into you through a port or a PICC line. So I've had ports, I've had PICC lines, I've had PICC lines in my chest or my neck. So basically a PICC line is like a very deep IV that stays there long term, and it can go in your arm or your chest. And I've had all of them. And with my condition, I have a ton of scar tissue from being poked so many times. They literally told me, you have too many blood clots in your arms, your chest. You have so much scar tissue. The only place we can put it now that you're older is your chest. And it's a lot more riskier and it's more painful, but it's necessary. And to me, it wasn't that painful because everything I've gone through, I was like, oh, that's it, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's considered a treatment as well. So I would take medication on top of having a pump with me 16 hours a day and having to carry it in a backpack. So it was kind of awkward being on dates, like, oh, I have tubes hanging out and I got a backpack with a pump. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, you know?
How did that work? Because you just mentioned like going on dates. Like, how did you have those conversations explaining what the situation is, especially because it was visible?
Right. Yeah. And that's what's funny is because technically I have an invisible illness. Unless I take my clothes off, you're going to see the bag. And then, you know, depending on what I'm wearing or whatever, the weather, you're going to see the tubes. I don't have it right now, but I probably will in the near future. But yeah, going on those dates was actually really fun and interesting. What I tell other patients is, you know, this illness is pretty much what you make of it. You could be very negative and let it run your life and define it, you know, and you could just be like in this self-pity hole, or you could just be like, you know what, I'm still able to walk, I'm still breathing, I can get out of the hospital, I'm going to make the best of it. And if I want to date, you know, if I don't want to date, then don't. Or if I want to go play basketball, I'll find a way. It's about improvising. And going on dates to me was a really good experience because it kind of pushed me to go out of my comfort zone. Because I'm pretty sure not that many people would be in that situation like me. They don't understand, they can't relate. So to me, I just saw it as like just an experience, you know, something to try. And it really helped my confidence because now I can literally go up to anyone and talk to anyone and explain to them, hey, I have a permanent medical device attached to me. I basically don't poop the way you do or normal people. I poop differently. And, you know, it's a result from cancer and Crohn's and different treatments. And if they ask, I'll explain it. And then with the tubes, like the PICC line, I was on a date and this guy was just staring at it. And I was like, yeah, I hope you don't mind, but I have to flush my line, you know, to keep it open so it doesn't clot. Is that going to freak you out? Is it okay if I just do it right here? And like, you can just stand in front of me so no one freaks out and sees it. And he was like, yeah, that's okay. And he was just staring directly at me while I was like flushing it with my saline flush. And because I know how to do it. And he got like really pale and I was like, are you okay? And it just looked like he was about to faint. And he's like, I'm sorry, I lied to you. Like, I'm just not used to seeing stuff like that. And it's funny, you know, like you just go with the flow.
Yeah, you just get through those experiences. So how did you kind of gain that confidence to be able to do that? Because I know a lot of people may even hesitate to go out with people just because they're scared of what they'll think.
Mhm.
Did you ever have those hesitancies?
I'd be lying if I said there was never a point where I was insecure about it. I mean, I'm sure everyone goes through that phase. When I first got my ileostomy, it was nothing what I expected. It was nothing what they prepared me for. I feel like that's something we lack in that community is we need a lot more education and just preparing the patient because it's a really big lifestyle change. It's not only that physically, but emotionally, it's so insane. And it takes such a dig at your self-esteem. I happened to be in a very toxic relationship at the time when I got it. So I was around 25 and, you know, I just woke up, found out they found cancer and they had to do more surgery than expected. And then I'm going to have the bag longer than expected. And it might affect fertility. At 25, you're like, oh my God. And the person I was with at the time that was supposed to be supportive wasn't. He made it about him and how he can't get his needs fulfilled because I'm dealing with this. And I was going through like a lot of emotions and mental breakdowns, anxiety attacks. So I had to cut him out because I was like, you're not being supportive or helping. I need to look out for myself. So I made that decision and then I was completely alone. And I think that was the hardest part for me with all this is not having a strong support system, because at that age, who knows what that's like. You don't meet a lot of young people that are like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is, unless you're like a nurse or a doctor. So all my friends were just like, so can you drink, can you party? And I was like, I had to change all my wardrobe. I went through really bad depression. There was times where I was even suicidal, because I was like, I don't want this, I don't want to live like this, it's the end of the world. And finally, I pushed myself to just learn how to adjust. And that's pretty much what I tell everyone, is like, the whole point of this is learning how to adjust to it and learning how to deal with it, because you can't control it. So you can either sit there and isolate yourself, which I did, but that just made things worse. So I finally like sat with myself for a long time and just was like, yes, this sucks, but you know what? Like, this doesn't have to be the end of the story for me. Like, I obviously have a purpose, and I can still do those things, and I can still have a social life. I can still have a love life. Like, why am I letting this affect me so much? So I did a lot of like soul searching, and I just started hanging out with friends. And I broke down at one party because it leaked everywhere, and I had to change it in the bathroom while everyone was like partying. And I just felt so alone. Like, how am I going to relate to these people? Like, all my friends are normal, they're out there having fun, and I'm stuck in a bathroom, like, taking care of this. And I actually wrote an article about that was published, about, how that's kind of like a metaphor for being a patient, with this autoimmune disease and the ileostomy, and like how you feel isolated, because it's very uncommon. So to me, that's the worst part of having this illness, is the isolation, the emotional part of it. I got over it after a year, and I just kept working on my attitude about it, how I see myself. I even went to therapy. And then I just packed my bags, and I was just like, I'm gonna go travel. And I just traveled all over the world. I played basketball in the Philippines. I started a nonprofit. I taught English. I did everything with a bag. And all I did was just put my supplies in my backpack, and I went. So I feel like, okay, if I can do that, I can do anything.
Wow. You've done so much, and you're so resilient. Like, good job. And I'm very proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
You've accomplished so much, and dealing with that, like, you've had a lot of ups and downs. You did share some of that, but in terms of like really being in social settings, because you didn't mention like partying and drinking, how did those conversations go with your friends?
So this is the thing I've learned. So now that I'm 32, I'm a lot older and mature, and, I'm wiser. I drove myself crazy because I would be so bitter and upset that like everyone around me, including my family, didn't understand what I'm going through, or they didn't ask, or they wouldn't want to be involved. But then I kind of changed the way I thought about everything. And I was kind of like, you know what? If I were in their shoes and I had average normal health and I had no knowledge whatsoever, I probably would be exactly how they are. It doesn't mean they're bad people or bad friends. It just means that they're just not wired that way. They're not mature enough, and they haven't been through the same experiences as me. So, their way of thinking is very different. They would never understand. No one would, unless they're going through exactly what I'm going through. And even with my family, not many of them get it, but they often sometimes tell me like, I can't even imagine, but you know what, like, we're here to support you. And I've had like a small handful of friends that come along the way, and they actually are very supportive and very caring, and like they research it, or they visit me in the hospital, or like they ask me how's everything going. And that literally means the world to me, because I feel like I don't expect anyone to do that, but it means a lot, because it's like, oh, thanks, you didn't forget about me.
Yeah, it definitely shows that one extra step. It shows that they care a little bit more, and they don't have to do that. Like, that's not something that they owe you, and they don't have to do it. But the fact that they're taking initiative to even like look into it, I feel like it just makes us as people living with those autoimmune diseases like really happy. Different acts of kindness or like different ways is really helpful. Like, even if you didn't search it up, but you were just like there if I needed to talk about something. The fact that they're just taking that time out of their day to do one extra step for you, just it shows that not only do they care about you, but I hope they know that they mean a lot because they've done so much. So since you've been through all these diagnoses, and you did talk a little bit about your family, what was your family's reaction when you were diagnosed with lupus and then diagnosed with cancer?
Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. My family is they're supportive, but not the way I wish they were, if that makes sense. So I have an Asian background and American, obviously. So in Asian culture, it's kind of like we don't talk about emotions. We don't talk about things that are like an issue. We just brush it under the rug. It's a cultural thing. And yeah, they're just it's uncomfortable for them to talk about. And they kind of just all they pretty much ask is like, are you okay? And then that's it. It's like, it doesn't go very far. It's very superficial. It's not very substantial. A lot of my family don't even know I had cancer because I didn't want to worry them. I just felt like I was a huge burden. And some of them are in denial about it. And I was too weak to drive to do those few rounds of chemo. So I would take Uber, I would take the bus, cabs to get there because I just didn't want to ask for help from anyone. And that was really rough because like the nurses would have to come outside, get a walker or a wheelchair and like help me because I was so weak. But I didn't want anyone or my family to see that because I'm so prideful of like being strong and like not being a burden to anyone.
And
yeah.
How did that affect your mental health?
I'm not gonna lie, it still affects me till this day because it feels kind of like I'm still going through all this alone. And that's one thing I talk about a lot sometimes in my writing and on social media is like people focus so much on the physical aspect or struggles of this illness. But I think the biggest part of it is the mental health and the emotions and the feeling of isolation. No one really talks about that. And another thing like people don't really acknowledge is that we're not really allowed to talk about it. I mean, like I'm told constantly, oh, you need to be strong, you need to be positive. And I'm like, I am. And they're like, well, don't be so negative, like I know the doctor said this, but don't be negative, don't think like that. And I'm like, yeah, but that's easy for you to say. You don't wake up every day in this body and go to all these appointments and you're exhausted, like, of course you're going to say that. But for someone like me, this is my life, this is my reality, and I'm being honest about what I'm going through. And some people just don't know how to accept that or react to it. But I think it's very important that if you do have a loved one that is dealing with an autoimmune disease or any kind of illness that's long-term or terminal, just let them talk about how they're feeling, let them be honest about their reality. And if they're upset or crying or angry and they're having feelings about it, let them, they're allowed to have that. We're human, and it doesn't mean we're negative. It just means that we have our moments where we're frustrated, we're overwhelmed, and that's totally normal. If you're not going through what we're going through and facing that, you don't really have that authority to tell us how we should deal with it. And I think that's really big. And as a patient advocate, when I visit patients in the hospital, I tell them all the time, I'm here so you can just be real and just let it all out. I'm going to let you talk and let you say everything you're feeling, because these nurses and doctors, they're just in and out. They're just trying to get you home and healed up. That's it. But like no one's really there to treat the emotional, the mental health problem with that patient that just woke up and looked down and saw a bag and they're like, what is this? What do I do? That's a lot. And that's why I want to make an initiative where we have like resources for them, like patient advocates or social workers that are like helping them cope with that, because that can do so much to you. And if you're not in the right state of mind emotionally and you're like on the edge, can you imagine that patient that's in that mental state? And then doctors and nurses are just not taking the time to explain it or let them talk about it, that could really push them over the edge. So I think it's really important that we have resources and support systems for these patients. They really need it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what's really important is that people just listen. Like, you don't have to, like you mentioned, you don't have to give any sort of advice. Maybe you don't even feel like you can give that right advice, but sometimes people just need someone to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And segueing into, you mentioned therapy. So how did that kind of help you throughout the way, if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, sure. For me, therapy, I always know what's right and what to do. That's just me. I've always kind of just like, no matter what happens to me, I always figure it out. And I always know, like, okay, this is what I need to work on. Like, I'm very self-aware. But for me, it's like therapy wasn't really for me to get like help or tools on like how to be better or like anything like that. And I know it's different for everyone. So I'm not saying other people shouldn't go to therapy, but for me, it wasn't so much that. It was more like I need someone to talk to and just make sure I'm not insane, because everyone around me is telling me I'm being negative, or they're telling me that it's not that bad, or they're in denial, or they don't want to talk to me about it. So like, I just need to talk to a professional and make sure like, okay, this is what I'm going through and this is what I'm surrounded by. Am I okay? Like, is it in my head, or like, do I have permission to be upset about it? And they were like, yes, 100%. Like, you have every right to be upset. And like, yeah, that's not okay. And like, your feelings are valid. And like, it's okay. You'll get through this. You'll figure it out. And I did. So that's a big help. And every now and then I'll check in just to get like a like a checkup, like a little tune up, like mentally.
That's great. I'm glad that it worked for you. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but it is definitely a resource out there. I know a lot of people don't have the best relationships with family or friends, and it's kind of like a therapist is like outside of that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, did you have any bad experiences with your rheumatologist at any point, or did every single like visit or checkup go well?
I think it's really important to, as like, if you're a patient, I tell everyone this, like, whether it's a small thing or not, like, whether you have like an acute illness, which means like it's just short term, and then chronic means it's long term or forever. So whether it's acute or chronic, I always tell the patient, be your biggest advocate, because no one's going to advocate for you as much as you will. It's very rare you'll have doctors or nurses advocate for you. So people get scared and they think, oh, this doctor is a specialist, it's a doctor, they know everything, so they must be right. I can't tell you how many times I've been misdiagnosed. Like, my first rheumatologist, I can't remember his name, but it was an old guy, and he first said I had psoriasis and like Sjogren's or something like that, and that's why I was getting like rashes. And I was like, that doesn't sound right though, because like, I talked to a friend of mine who actually passed away, but she had lupus, and we had the same exact symptoms, and I was just like, it sounds like lupus, like everything points to lupus. And it was just weird. And they were like testing me for it with blood. And obviously it takes a while to show up in blood work sometimes. So they would be like, oh, but your levels are too low to be lupus, because they're testing ANA. So I kept pushing for it and I got fed up. So then I went and found another, and they did way more tests. And they were like, yeah, you do have lupus. It's showing up in your blood work. It's showing up in your bones, your kidneys, your liver, your heart. Like, yeah, they were like, it's definitely lupus and you're not crazy. So I was like, okay. So I fired the other doctor and I stuck with them. And I fired a lot of doctors, and I've gone head to head with some of them sometimes. And it got heated because I was like, it's my body, my life. I'm demanding better care. And, if you're not going to do that, then bye. I'll find someone else.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot of doctors, a lot of diagnoses. Like,
Yeah.
you're still so positive and you're like going on with your life. You're playing basketball, you're active. And so, on the topic of basketball, when did you start playing basketball?
So there's this ultrasound of me and my mom's belly, and on the ultrasound photo, I'm holding a basketball. So that's when it began.
Wait.
I'm just kidding. I was just making a joke, like I was born to play basketball.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's an ultrasound like that because I love basketball. I started probably around 5, and then I would just play with other kids, you know, in the streets or whatever. I'm a 90s baby, so like we didn't have smartphones or anything like that. So we were always playing outside. And I remember I had a basketball and a shopping cart, and I would just like shoot baskets in there. And I would always watch like Michael Jordan and the Lakers. And, you know, I was a really big fan of that. And I got really into it. And then my parents put a basketball hoop on our garage, and I'd just be constantly shooting and playing, dribbling. And then it just kind of stayed with me. I played a lot of sports, but basketball and surfing has always been my biggest passions, mainly basketball. So I've been playing basketball from 5 to middle school to high school, college, overseas for a bit, and then now here making a comeback in LA and just playing in like 4 leagues right now, and working on some projects as well. I play like every day, everywhere.
I feel like a lot of people that have chronic illnesses and play sports end up quitting. And from what I've been hearing from you is that you're still playing. So what were the kind of ups and downs? Did you have any, at any point of your life, did you ever feel like, okay, like I can't do this anymore?
Oh, for sure. In college, that's when I was going through the surgeries, the cancer diagnosis, and it was just a lot. And I had to kind of like take a step back and take a break. I talked to my team and my coach and my teachers about it. And I was just like, I need to focus on my health because right now that's way more important. It trumps everything else going on. So I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to take a step back because if I want to continue playing basketball in the future, and I knew I would, I'm just a very driven person. I was like, nothing will stop me. If I have to take a step back and take care of this, I will, but I'm going to be back and I'm going to be better and I'm going to train my ass off. So I took a step back, traveled a bit, took care of my health, and then went through more big surgeries that were like tough on me. And I kind of like got a little off track with basketball. Like I still loved it, but I was like, it's been so long. I've been going through so much. Like it's never going to be the same. I'm not going to be able to play the way I used to, you know, like I feel like I now have to climb higher to get to that level. And then about 2 years ago, I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go for it because I'm tired of just, you know, living with this illness, but like not doing what I really love, you know? So I just went for it and I just started searching and going through my connections of people that know basketball runs. And the first basketball run I did was with who's my good friend now, Sheikha. She runs an all women's basketball league in Orange County called All In Women's Basketball. And I joined that. I started playing with them. And the first time I stepped on the court, I was just like, oh my God, I had butterflies. And then like, I just struggled so hard to keep up with running. And I was like, that's okay. I'm just going to keep coming, getting better. And I just started waking up early, running, playing, being at every game. And then I signed up for for a while, the league, and got on the team and just played every Monday night. And the rest is history. Now I'm playing with like pros and like overseas. I'm in semi-pro leagues, you know, I've been team captain of an awesome team. I see Meta World Peace all the time and train over there with him and work on projects with him. So I feel like I've been able to turn all this into something good. And now I'm able to like share my story, inspire others, and say, look, I have this, but it's not stopping me. Like, I'm here to play basketball, and, I can do it. Anyone can. It's possible.
Yeah, really inspirational. The fact that you're like still doing so much and still motivated to do it. Like, do you experience pain when you play basketball?
I get that question a lot, and it's kind of bad to say this, but like, I'm always in pain. So I'm kind of like used to the aching pain you get from like autoimmune. To me, it's like I just accepted a long time ago and came to terms like, that's just going to be my life. I'm going to have to like deal with it. And if I need to rest, I'll rest. I know my limits, but I still don't want to quit basketball. Like, I want to push myself just like Kobe, like I love his mentality, and I want to be like that because that really inspired me. I play almost every day, and if I'm in too much pain, I take a break or I rest. And most of the people I play with, they understand, and they're super supportive, and they're like, yeah, put your health first. It's okay. Like, we're still here. But I get mad at myself because whenever I take a break, I feel like I'm set back multiple days. So I have to make up for it. And then I'll just be back on the court, like even if I was in the hospital or like just resting, I'm like, surprise, I'm here. And they're like, wow. So I just always want to play. And a lot of people ask me how I play with the bag. There is a product called Stealth Belt for people with ileostomies or colostomies that are active. So it's like a belt with Velcro, and it protects the bag. I've tried it a few times for basketball, but for some reason for me, it was actually more limiting. It's not flexible. So I just wear compression shorts. It keeps it tight to my body and it protects it. It's a lot more flexible, so I can move around and be more active. So that's what I do.
Good tip for anyone that wants to be active but has to use one of those bags. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then you also started a nonprofit organization. So aside from basketball, you have a nonprofit organization helping communities in third world countries. What is this organization, and what is some of the work that you do?
So when I was in the Philippines, I was teaching English and living my life out there. And there in Cambodia and Thailand, I remember I've never seen poverty like that before. A lot of the students I had would come to class. Some of them wouldn't be in their uniform. They'd be in like raggedy clothes, or they didn't have shoes. Some of them didn't have any school supplies. The school was running out of school supplies. They don't have like modern products. Like, they had an old chalkboard. They don't have like a whiteboard or a projector. The desks are very old. The chairs are old. I mean, I love the Philippines. I'm not putting them down, but there are areas that are very poor. And the area I happen to teach in is called Inayawan. And the school was literally down the street from the Philippines' biggest dump site. Some of my students actually live in there, I found out, and they would dig through it after school to find something to eat or find something to sell for money. So I was like, okay, so how can I make a solution to fix the problem with the dump site and the trash and pollution, and help the children that don't have medical supplies, don't have school supplies, or the school that doesn't have decent classrooms? Why don't we recycle the trash and turn it into medical supplies that they need, school supplies? I can go to one of the stores and get school supplies for now and give them to them. I can get a whiteboard for the schools and put them in the classrooms. So I kind of started small, and then I talked to the principal and some friends out there and some friends here. And it's not an official nonprofit yet. I'm still working on getting it to be a 501c. But yeah, I've just been doing that, talking to engineers about the recycling part of it. We were able to give out tons of medical supplies, clothes, shoes, school supplies. And there's a kid I met through Facebook in Davao. He has the same thing as me, and he was using trash bags and grocery bags as a bag for his intestine coming out. So the part of the intestine that comes out of the abdomen, that's called a stoma, and that's where the output comes out. So that's why we have the bag attached to it, because that's what's collecting it. So this poor baby who's not even one, that's how he was living. And his poor mom was like, I don't know what to do. Do you have any extra supplies? And I was like, yeah. So I sent them supplies. I sent them some money to help them out. And I was able to help him get surgery. I was able to find an organization that will consistently send them free medical supplies so he doesn't have to use grocery bags. So yeah, there's a lot of kids and even adults in the Philippines and other third world countries that don't have the same resources that I do here, for medical supplies or medical care. Like in the Philippines, at their hospitals, you basically have to pay for everything. And if you're bleeding and you come into the ER, they're going to tell you, sorry, we can't help you unless you pay. So it's very different from here. And for me, that was a huge culture shock. And I was like, I can't leave this country and not do something. So that's why I'm very passionate about my nonprofit.
That's crazy. Like, even I didn't know that. And I'm so glad that you were able to help people there and make such a big difference. So definitely, like, do you have like a website or social media or any like account yet about it?
So on Facebook, it's called the Mango House.
Okay.
I named it after my rabbit named Mango, and that passed away. And in the Philippines, mangoes are like a huge deal. Everyone loves eating mangoes. So I just wanted to make it like very cute and welcoming. And I wanted to put house in the name because my ultimate goal is to like live there simultaneously and do some like basketball projects out there and community outreach programs and build a community center.
Great. So I will definitely link those because I think it's important that people are aware of what's happening. And it's so great that you're raising awareness about this cause and you're passionate about this cause, because I think a lot of us don't even know that. And we take for granted the medical supplies that we have and the supplies that we have, where we can actually be helping other people in different ways. So definitely everyone tuning in, check it out. I kind of wanted to end off this podcast with an advice segment. So you said a lot of inspiring things and given advice along the way of this podcast episode. And I think just to wrap up, it would be really nice to get some more advice. So hearing from someone else and the work that you're doing and how inspirational you are, like, this podcast is for people to tune in, to know that, like Amanda said, her life has not ended. She's built so much resilience, continue what she wanted to do. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, to bring on like inspirational people to share their stories, to show that you could be isolated and alone, but we have so many people here doing things with their lives and still living with those autoimmune diseases. And you are a great prime example of one of those people. So thank you for that. I wanted to end with, what advice would you give to those who are having difficulty gaining that support from their friends and their families? Do you have any advice that you would say to them? They just want to talk to someone, but they don't know what to do or where to go.
Thank you for saying all that. Well, I would say when I was diagnosed with multi-organ dysfunction, they told me my survival rate is very low. So they said I probably won't outlive my dog. And that was very tough to hear, because I then had to plan out my funeral, my will with my family. And that was very heavy for me because in your 30s, that's not even something you would ever imagine doing. So I understand we have to do that just in case something happens to me, but it really opened up my eyes and put things in perspective. And now I'm just one of those unstoppable people where I hate wasting my time. And my advice for people going through what I'm going through with struggles of getting support would be, just live your life. It's hard for you to get that support from someone close to you, and it's taking that long or it's that difficult. Maybe they're not the right person. It doesn't mean they're bad. It just means like they just don't have the capability of doing it. So learn how to be your own support system, learn how to cope with that, and find other people. There's 7 billion people in the world, and there's so many people out there that will support you, that will be there for you, that will encourage you. They will let you talk. They will let you cry.
Yeah. And there's a whole community, a chronic illness community online, on social media. You can reach out to either one of us. You can talk to us. Like, we were so happy to talk to all of you because we know what it feels like to be isolated at those periods. So I just, it just makes the conversation even more engaging and like more relatable when you find someone else feeling that way.
It's amazing that there's so many people out there. So I want people to know that, you know, like, you're not alone. There's so many people, and it's actually more common than you can expect.
So thank you so much, Amanda, for joining me on the podcast today. We had a very insightful and inspirational conversation. And we talked about your different diagnoses and the ups and downs of kind of living with a chronic illness, and then talking about mental health, family, friends. You know, there are negatives, but also you've made the best out of your disease and you were able to bounce back from it, do the things that you love. Talking about your nonprofit organization, that's super cool. It's coming soon. It's going to become a nonprofit. So we're going to check that out. I'll link all of your socials and the nonprofit socials in the description. And like, comment, subscribe, share this episode, and I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Amanda. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Keeping me